Meeting to order. We'll move to a call to roll, please.
Mayor Johnston,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Haney,
Here.
Councilmember Blatz,
Here.
Councilmember Francina,
Present.
Councilmember Wyrick,
Here present.
Key?
Nice to be present.
Okay.
When we're present.
Yeah, more literate.
Well, sometimes we're here and not present, right? Okay. We have a quorum. Randy, will you lead us in the pledge?
Ready? Begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the agenda.
Move to approve?
Okay, I have a motion. Second?
Second?
Okay, moved and seconded. Any objection? If not,
No.
so ordered. Okay, we have a workshop concerning the city budget. So, Mr. City Manager, would you like to take it over? What? Oh.
Public comments.
Oh, public comments, not on the, that's right, even for special meetings. Let's see, okay. Linda? And Brian, you're on deck.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, City Manager. My name is Linda Braunschweiger, and I'm the CEO for the Ventura County Housing Trust Fund. And one of the things tonight that you're going to be looking at is a potential investment in the Housing Trust Fund. We're a pool of money for the development of affordable housing throughout the county of Ventura. And we have support over the years from the county of Ventura and all 9 cities minus Ojai in the Housing Trust Fund. So I'm here once again to ask you to consider an investment. It's a great opportunity for you all to assist in any future development that might happen here in affordable housing, but also to support the other affordable housing going on throughout the county. It also will assist you in your housing element. Participating in the trust fund is one of the things that the Housing Community Development Department looks at as a way to show support for more affordable housing throughout the county. So I'm here to answer any questions if any come up this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brian?
Brian Akins, Treasurer, Ojai Valley Museum, first hat tonight. Just making that pitch. I have been in communication with Rudy. I sent him an email. I sent him the spreadsheet. I want Councilwoman Francina to know that I went through and carefully deleted all the lines I could. I increased the font size and I reduced the margins. So it's a little bit more readable, just for you. So that spreadsheet went to Rudy. Basically, it's the same type thing that we've presented to you in the years since you've been funding us. It takes outreach looking at our estimated expenditures within those line items are about $64,000. That's pretty close to what we did last year. And we talked in the board, and last year we also, and it's in your budget from last year, came to you and asked for funding for the to improve the internet within the museum. I want to thank you for that. It is amazingly fast and welcomed by all that come in. So thank you for that. This year we discussed it and we are asking for $60,000 with no add-ons. So we're trying to keep our expenditure costs down also. Museum-wise, as you may know, if you've been following them on Facebook, we have a hearty crowd that's traveling around. And if you were watching on Facebook, you'll see that there's a very special item coming back from the city of Toledo to the city of Ojai. Second item is the HPC. The budget for this current fiscal year has a budget of $15,000 for consultant services and $8,000 for other. We have been discussing items that we want to ask for historic resources reports to be done. However, the question is, with that $15,000 that's already in the budget, do we decide on how that money's spent, on what reports, or do we need to wait for go-ahead by the city council and therefore be running close to having that money go off into the next year? So just a question I have. And I told public people who I met with yesterday that I would ask that question tonight. Okay, thank you.
Mayor, may I just comment on that real quick?
Sure.
My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, the process would be a request from HPC for then to go to council. Is that correct or not correct?
That would be our understanding. Either the request could come from the Historic Preservation Commission, or council could make the request down to the Preservation Commission as well.
So I think you're free to make a request. Yes.
Since I have 8 seconds left, we are now in our second month where the line items is now increasing. A month ago, we said waiting to go to the city council. On Thursday, we have waiting to go to the city council with now 4 line items. So we have designated
You've already done that.
the items that we'd like
All
to
right,
have
so we'll
considered
take
by the
that up when
council.
we get to future agendas.
Great, thank you very much.
Mayor, I had one question for Brian. Brian, dude, we talked about money this year regarding the painting racks, and I didn't see them in your budget. Are you saying that you don't need them now, or are you going to look for funding in another manner for those?
The hanging racks were actually a request that was being done through the Art Commission because those items were going to be racks that were going to hold the paintings. We've actually, Wendy had the people come out and talk with us, so we have a whole different design that's going to take place. Actually, better ways of preserving the works and utilizing the space that we have right now, which, unless you're Kareem Abdul-Jabbar size, you can't use because they're places.
Well, why I'm asking you is I thought it was a joint venture. I know they were requesting the money, but I was wondering if you were thinking of requesting for it too, seeing how you're going to be the curator of them.
Again, that's a coordination issue with the Art Commission. I did see in the city budget when I was going through it in preparation for this meeting that there's $6,000
Okay,
that I believe
thank you.
is in there.
Mayor, I promise one quick question. Please compile
If you
some
will say that
statistics.
it's not quick, I'll be happy to call one.
All right.
Okay, Bill, go.
Please compile statistics on the visitor center usage for us to see.
Okay.
Thank you.
We do that. We do
Thank you.
time and day.
What
So,
was
yes,
the
sir.
question, Bill?
The use of the visitor center that the museum maintains, which is part of what we support.
Right.
I'd like to see some statistics on how many visitors have been using it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will do.
Any other questions of Brian? Okay. Okay, Mr. City Manager. No, pardon me, I've got another card. Bill Miley.
Hi, for the record, my name is Bill Miley. I'd like to reserve my comments until after the presentation. I wasn't able to get the budget because it's not available on the website. It doesn't come up, okay?
Sure. In fact, I guess all of the comments can be made during our budget, or should be budget requests submitted to the city manager, but, okay. Mr. City Manager.
Let me come around to speak at you instead of across to you. Well, here we are again. It seems like we were just talking about the budget. Another year has gone by. I have a few more gray hairs in my beard.
Yeah.
But you're not any fatter.
No, that's true. Don't think I've put on any weight either, but that's okay. Well, I'm happy to present to you tonight your first look at the fiscal year 18-19 budget. We've got quite a lot of information to present to you tonight. Again, this is really the kickoff to the process here for the budget discussion. This will not be our first budget workshop. And of course, our goal would be to try to get everything to you, hopefully at a meeting in early June and not at the end of June, at a time when the council feels that they are comfortable to be able to adopt a budget. We will need to have a budget adopted before July 1st, and we will need to have a balanced budget as well. If I go to the, I'm in control, other way. There we go. Overview of the budget this year. Again, we were impacted by the Thomas Fire, but we remain in good fiscal health. Revenues are projected to increase next year. The adopted, a couple things that we need to kind of explain the numbers here a little bit. The numbers that you see in your handouts sometimes can be confusing in terms of the total revenue and expenditure, depending on whether or not that number is showing whether we've taken out the 20% of the TOT that goes to the capital improvement fund. So it can be a little tricky trying to compare numbers back and forth, but hopefully I can walk you through it and it will all make sense. So we started last year and made quite a number of adjustments on both the revenue and the expense side, and we'll go over that a little bit later on. So it pushed us up from that about $9.5 million to about $10 million. But overall, a projected increase from 9.43 to 10.11 for revenues. A large part of that is being pushed by strong sales tax and TOT revenues. It can also get a little confusing because part of what gets counted with your revenues and expenditures are transfers that will be brought in for specific expenditures and projects, and that can seem to artificially push that number up. Expenses are also projected to increase from 9.36 million. It was 9.73 in the final adopted budget to 10.1 million, 10.11 billion. The budget does include a proposed contingency. I'll explain some detail on that as we go a little farther along. The capital improvement fund continues to be a priority. This budget continues the practice or policy of taking 20% of the transient occupancy tax and putting that into the capital improvement fund to be able to maintain our streets, roads, buildings, and everything else that we need to pay for, including our vehicles and all that. Concerns on the horizon. We're continuing to see rising PERS rates. We know that they're not likely to continue to meet their revenue projections in terms of what they're hoping to get from the market. So while things are looking a little bit better in the short term, there are still long-term concerns that we will be paying more and more for retirement into the PERS system. Also, of course, we need to always be ready for the next emergency or recession. We were very lucky in a number of areas in terms of how we were able to survive the Thomas Fire, both fiscally and in terms of the actual damage and impact to the town. But it serves as a reminder that those are very real and they will be coming. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when, and we need to be ready for that. We'll go over in some detail the big three revenues. Again, our TOT, our sales tax, and our property tax. That's really what fuels our revenues. Oop, wrong way. Totally wrong way. Quick look at the pie chart just showing where the revenues come from. You can see at the very bottom there, the TOT is a very large portion of that, along with the property tax and the sales tax. Don't ask me to explain everything that's in the other. That would be a good question for Rudy, but we can give you that detail. Revenue from other agencies, other taxes, and recreation make up the remainder of the revenues. But again, you can see that the TOT, the property tax, and the sales tax make up about 2/3 of that.
Other includes fee revenues?
Other would include fees, yes. Except for recreation fees, which are broken out
Except
of
for
the
the
recreation part of the pie, right? On the expenditure side of things, administration is the largest piece of the pie. That includes city manager's office, city council, the elected official support, as well as planning, finance.
Police is the largest portion.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's perspective. Right, police 3.445 and admin 2.692. So, right, police is still the big draw on the budget. Of course, that's our contract with the Sheriff's Department. Mentioned the departments that make up the cost of the administration, and the other costs there you can see recreation, public works, community development, and capital transfers. So I misspoke. The admin portion just includes city manager and the support for elected officials, would include city attorney and the finance department.
And another big piece of that is the non-departmental, which includes our unfunded PERS liability, retire medical, and so forth.
Thank you, Rudy.
Right.
Budget commitments and restraints. Again, we're still working through the Thomas Fire recovery. As you just wisely pointed out, police and public safety is still the biggest part of the cost of the city's budget, and one that is rather intractable in terms of being able to make any significant changes there. We're pretty locked in there, at least today. Retirement PERS, as I mentioned, an ongoing cost that continues to rise. Retiree medical, I should note we're actually working on contracting with the study to get a little bit better handle in terms of what the projections on those costs are going to be going into the future so that we can be a little bit more prepared for that. And of course, again, maintaining the city infrastructure, our streets, sidewalks, facilities, parks, and grounds. I've said it before and say it again, we were putting somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1.2 million into our streets, and we probably should be putting in somewhere about 1.5, 1.6 per year to be able to get back up to where we'd like to get it back to the acceptable level on a pavement management index. We're moving in the right direction, but we have a ways to go. Quick look at the current fiscal year. Despite the challenges that we saw this year, largely from the Thomas Fire and the associated shutdowns of that, revenues are only anticipated to fall short of the budget by $96,000. So we've done a good job, I think, of meeting those projections, and hopefully that will continue through the rest of the year, but we're very confident about that number. And expenses, we've done a good job toeing the line on that, as we typically do, because we do try to budget rather conservatively. And right now, for projected end of the year, we're projecting that will be $372,000 less than budgeted. So that leaves us to a projected positive ending balance for this fiscal year. The general fund reserve includes unreserved and undesignated fund balances. The policy is that it's supposed to be at 50% of the adopted general fund operating budget. So if we follow through to what we have proposed for fiscal year 18-19, that would be $5.05 million. We're projecting as of the end of this fiscal year that we would have $3.69 million in the reserve, which is approximately 73% of the goal. As we've stated before, that reserve amount fluctuates throughout the year because we tend to get our revenues in big chunks with property taxes and quarterly sales tax, but the bills come throughout the year. So if you watch that, at one point, I think in the last year, we actually reached the goal, but that was one of the times when we were flush and we'd gotten paid and hadn't quite had to pay all of our bills yet. So, but again, at the end of the year, we're going to be about 75% of that target. Point is, we're still not at the target. So again, the job for the council is to adopt a balanced budget, get that adopted by June 30th. We did hold a goal workshop on April 24th. Thank you again for everybody's participation in that. I do have some handouts from that I'll give you out a little bit later tonight. We have tonight's kickoff budget workshop. We have May 22nd as a proposed follow-up workshop. At that meeting, we would be presenting the capital improvement plan to the City Council. We would also be inviting any other groups that haven't, any other community groups that haven't made their request to the City Council. Staff will coordinate with them and have them present at that May 22nd meeting. We did have on the calendar and I don't think we can discuss this. We could even discuss this in the regular meeting. We did have on the schedule a budget workshop for June 12th. I understand one member of council has asked that we reconsider holding that so that they can attend, or they and other members could attend a special meeting of the Board of Supervisors about short-term rentals. So we can talk a little about that a little bit later on tonight in terms of how we want to schedule that. And I should note that we have a couple of other Tuesdays as opportunities for budget workshops if needed or council desires it. May 29th is the 5th Tuesday of the month. That is currently open. We could schedule that date for a budget workshop, as well as June 5th, the first Tuesday of the month. But our goal is to hopefully wrap this up and get it to council for adoption on June 12th. And barring that, we would have the regular meeting on June 27th.
So you want to just come back to that? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, if we could come back to that, right. We could even talk about that under future meetings, in the regular meeting or at the end of the workshop, whatever council's pleasure. So again, we did hold our goal-setting workshop on April 24th to discuss goals and projects for the fiscal year. Council agreed on a statement that the City Council is working to create that Ojai is a sustainable and resilient city that preserves and protects its quality of life. So we had a vision statement that came out as part of that. And the council also established the following broad goals: ensuring prudent fiscal planning, timely, effective financial planning, increasing organizational efficiency, strong customer service culture, strengthening our infrastructure, effective coordination with county, state, and other agencies. So those were the goals that the council came up with as part of the workshop, and we do have a handout that we'll give you out a little bit later tonight on that. Key items for council discussion. We have included in this budget money to get underway for a general plan update. In discussions with your new community development director, we came up with $50,000. We think that would be about the right amount to get this started. We can certainly discuss that and massage that a little bit further. But we do have money in there to begin the general plan update. Other items that council has requested and we'd like to be able to take a look at has been, we're putting it here in kind of the broad category of citizen relationship management applications. Again, we didn't have that in the budget as it's drafted. We have looked at a couple of application providers, and those estimates range between 10 and 15,000. Those are, again, applications that would enable people to better interact with city government, to either get information or seek information or file complaints and that type of thing. Also a way to, I think, track responses and get feedback on concepts and plans and things like that. So we could talk a little more detail on that, and I think Mr. Vega is preparing a little more that we'll bring to council for that. We've also heard requests of the city to participate in the Drought Economic Impact Study that is being coordinated by the is that the Upper Ventura? Help me out.
Ventura River Water District.
Thank you,
Bert
Ventura.
Rapp, the general
Right,
manager.
right. I knew it was Bert. I just couldn't remember Bert's agency. So the city has been asked if they wanted to participate in that. I've heard anywhere from the ask from $3,000 to $5,000 for that. So again, that is not in the budget, but that is on your plate for consideration. Other items include water infiltration grants, and that is an item for discussion and direction on your on the regular meeting tonight. So we will get into that discussion at the regular meeting. Also had a request to consider doing an affordable housing demonstration project that would consider using city-owned property to develop some demo affordable housing. And as you heard from Ms. Braunschweiger, we have a request from the County Housing Trust Fund to participate in that. The ask is a one-time ask of $50,000. As was correctly noted, the county and all the other 9 cities in the Ventura County have participated in that. Ojai is the sole holdout. So I'm bringing that request to you if you want to consider that. That would not be funded by the general fund. That would be funded by our low moderate housing funds.
At some point, can you tell us why we're the sole holdout? Did the previous council decide that?
And why are we characterizing as being a holdout as opposed to a non-participant?
That's a fair statement, Mr. Mayor. That was my spin on things, and that was not a fair statement. So we are the only one that has not participated. So we can put that in a very non-judgmental way. I do not know. I don't have the exact history on when the last request came to council. Perhaps Ms. Braunschweiger could, if she would like to, could answer a little further if council would like.
I don't, why don't we go through the budget process? That should be right along with all the other budget requests, which I assume will come at a later meeting with a price tag on them.
But we can find out maybe if there's time that she could explain it, because I don't know the history.
Yeah, right. I mean, furnish us with the benefits or, the history would be nice to
Will do.
to know.
Okay, all right. I'm sure she can do that for you. I know council has also requested a parking study. We haven't put a dollar figure on that yet. but we want to keep that on the list of things to consider. And then I'm not sure that this is a key item for council discussion. Mr. Vega and I go back and forth on this, but the council chamber lighting upgrade. So we actually did a little bit of demonstration for you prior to the meeting, and there are different types and temperatures of lights up here. So if we have a little bit time at the end of the meeting, perhaps we can revisit that. But we still have quite a few things to get through here tonight. So remaining questions, staffing. I know council has been looking at whether or not they wanted to convert the remaining 36-hour employees to a 40-hour schedule. We'll also be needing to take a look at compensation adjustments for part-time employees. Some of the ones at the lower end of the range are getting affected by the changes in the minimum wage. So we typically bring back a updated part-time salary schedule once a year along with the updated fee schedule. So we'll be bringing that forward as well. And then also we'll be giving you some numbers. Council had asked for cost comparison if we were trying to bring in the code compliance and building official in-house versus the contract arrangement that we have now. And I will be sharing that with you as well. Community support and the Arts Commission funding and the contingency amount. For the purpose of the budget presentation, what I have done is I pulled out the funding that we had provided to the communities groups in the previous year, and I put that all together in a contingency fund. However, just to make this really clear for everybody and not cause any panic, if the council wanted to continue funding those community groups at the same level that they had in previous years, it would basically take the contingency, which right now is $259,000, and it would take it down to $149,000.
Okay, but that's not a contingency. That is using the, quote, surplus of revenues over mandatory expenditures, rather than just costing out. What does it cost us to continue doing what we're doing today in next year's dollars? Is that in here anywhere?
Well, I don't know that we have it in that specific format. I guess another way to answer would be we have tried to make sure that we accounted for everything that we needed to do, and then everything that is in terms of an option, we've tried to set that aside. So in order to maintain what we're doing today, we can do all that, and we would still have about $150,000 left over.
Right, okay, again, that's a surplus of revenues over expenditures.
That's correct.
What is the function of our Finance and Budget Committee? I was under the impression that this level of detail would have come back to the council subcommittee before it would be presented here, and that we would end up with a price tag on what does it take to stay in business at the level doing the things we're currently doing at next year's dollars, compare that to the revenues, say, are we ahead or behind? Do we have enough money to do that? Now, this sounds like maybe we have enough money to do it, but then it doesn't have an analysis of the fund balance, which we talked about at the last Finance Committee meeting. And you have mentioned that we're about, what did you say the percentage was of the?
Reserve, about 73% projected.
About 73%, but the analysis of what makes up that number as a, okay, I've used the analogy for simplicity's sake, and not to offend anybody, our friends over at Lake Casitas. But the Lake Casitas Dam was built to create a reservoir to have a water supply in reserve in the event that we would go through some dry years. The general fund reserve is supposed to be like a Lake Casitas.
Correct.
You know, a reserve. Well, maybe it's too much like Lake Casitas right now, having less than.
No, I think we have more than they have.
I think we're doing
Yeah,
better.
right, we
We're
might
at
be better off.
73 and they're at 35, Mayor.
Right, okay. So, but we should be revisiting that assumption and agreement amongst ourselves to pay ourselves first, because there's a resolution that you guys gave to the Finance Committee that the City Council adopted a resolution that said there would be 50%, and it would only be touched touched in cases of emergency, like the Thomas Fire, although we were very fortunate not to have to hit it for much, and that as that money got drawn out, it would be repaid first. When I got this document a couple days ago, I don't see how that analysis is yet to be done. So is there a timing when this is coming to the Finance and Budget Committee so that the council in general session doesn't have to try to figure these things out?
I can answer. So we did have the reserve policy scheduled to come back to council, and we are going to have a finance budget committee before then. I think we had scheduled it to come back to council on June 12th. So I think it would be.
But I thought at the last committee meeting, thought Rudy said that it didn't need to come back to council. They just wanted clarity, which I thought we had somewhat achieved. And now it seems like we're doing that last rather than first, but. Okay, I won't take any more time.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just make a comment. I agree with what you're saying. In all the other, and of course, the city's a little bit different, but for the board I sit on at Gold Coast Transit and other private sector boards, what is most helpful for the board, unlike the Finance Committee that wants to get into the details a little bit more, is we see what our revenues are going to look like for the upcoming year. And to fund what we did this year, it's going to cost X number of dollars, which leaves extra money perhaps. And then there's certain things that the administrative staff, the city manager, feels as though is necessary from an administrative standpoint, from the management of the city to do. And then you plug that in to show these are additional expenditures that really we need from an administrative standpoint. And that leaves whatever is left over. And then we have certain line items that we, as a council, could decide upon. And we can decide, okay, whatever we are anticipating is going to be an excess revenue, we can now say, well, this much is going to go into the reserve. We look at all the community interest groups that want money. We can allocate those out. And that's really about it. I mean, I don't see why we've got to get into all the other discussions that the Finance Committee could be in, because as a group in a workshop such as this, there's just too much to go over. That all should be hashed out, in the Finance Committee. When it comes to us, we only should be involved in those things which we believe we have a direct impact on deciding because of we know what the needs of the community are in those optional items, let's say. So that would be most meaningful to me.
Right. Well, our first responsibility as a board of directors is to take a look at the finances and say to ourselves, do we believe these numbers to be a good gamble? Because they're estimates. We're projecting into the future. I go through the numbers and I look at some of them and say, okay, that seems conservative. In others, I don't consider some of the numbers as reliable. Like property tax is a fairly stable revenue. Even the TOT and the sales tax are fairly stable, but they can fluctuate if you get into a recession. But then the building and planning permits, those also are affected rather dramatically by recession, and they also are affected dramatically by the amount of activity we have going. And since we're a built-out city, pretty much as Randy has pointed out on a number of occasions, which I agree with him, we cannot rely on that as a current revenue and put it into our operating expense. So it seems like that should be the first thing and maybe be done by the Finance Committee and then give a recommendation to this council. Right. So once we know what we all can agree on is a reasonable guess, if you've read that resolution that we're asked to sign every year, it says that we have of our own knowledge and believe that this is accurate. Well, I have to say I couldn't vote for a resolution like that if I don't know those things. So I think we need to take a step back and use the Finance and Budget Committee so that the council doesn't have to go through all that. And there's also should be a laundry list of things to do, but I would not get down into the detail of light bulbs in the city council chamber. I think that what we need are things like, I read in the paper when the reporter asked the staff, what can the city do about affordable housing? It's a big question. We talk about it at almost every meeting, and the response from staff was, Well, we don't know because the council hasn't made that a priority or hasn't directed us to do that. I submit to you that we have a building fund, and we even have a request here for money out of the building fund. Mr. Miley sitting in the audience, he and I have been working as volunteers for a long time this past year, trying to put something together with no budget and no funding. And when we came and asked for the money, I still haven't got an answer back, even for as much as $5,000 to do a design to present to the council so they could say, hey, you're on the wrong track, or no, that looks good, let's take the next step. But when I look at the budget, we didn't even appropriate any money out of our housing fund. We also, on our planning, general plan update, how much money is in the general plan fund, the fees that we charge for? I know we said we have $50,000 in this budget, but how many dollars have we collected for that purpose?
We have, at the end of this fiscal year, we expect to have about $200,000. At the beginning of this year, we had $151,000 in that fund.
Okay, so $200,000, but I would suggest to you, when the budget comes to the council, it should include that amount of money, unspecified, other than we are going to make it a priority to finally update our general plan and go through a public process. And if we don't need the money, fine, but at least it's appropriated so we don't keep going back into the reserve. Now, if that money is sitting in our reserve, then that changes the 70% number.
Correct.
And then that would give us a better picture of how much do we really have in that account. It's not really free money in case of recession. It's money for a special purpose.
Correct.
And we could also include in that, by the $200,000, the parking study, because that's part of the general plan. So those are the kind of chunks. The goals are nice that we went through in the workshop, but those are not priorities. Priorities are where you put your money, and we need to start having kind of decision packages, things that say the museum has got this much money last year, and these are the things they'd like to do next year, and this is the difference, and that would be set aside. And then you go to every commission and every community group, and that would be set aside. Then when we sit down here, we can take a look at it and say, hey, we got $100,000 in excess revenues over required expenditures. How are we going to divide that up amongst these requests that have come in? But I couldn't do that from what I saw. So anyway, I would strongly encourage us to send this through the Budget and Finance Committee and see if we can put it into that kind of form so we don't have to do it here in a general session.
Mayor Johnson?
Well,
Go ahead.
Mayor,
Okay.
I think we're all in agreement that that's the way to go. I agree with you 100% and with Councilman Blatz. Having it ran through that process, when it does come back to us, it just makes it easier. You're making recommendations, and we're looking at those recommendations and weighing them as we see what is in the best interest of the community. It simplifies all of this. Although I do want to say one thing on behalf of the city manager and staff, is the fact that they did do, once again, an excellent job in preparation and preparing numbers. Again, maybe this should have been taken to the Finance Committee in this package and then sent back to us in a more simpler form. I did want to say one thing, though, to Steve, is it seemed like the word contingency is what started this discussion.
Right.
So maybe we needed to rename that fund into something that it's not a contingency, but maybe it's an additional expenditure funds or additional community need fund, however you choose to name it. But okay. I think that's the gist of that. And then I had one other question. Are we going to be able to add any additional discussion items to this list during this process, or do we want to wait until the council session to add anything that we feel needs to be discussed during this process?
Well, my suggestion is if you have other things that you want to be considered, that you give that to the city manager outside of this situation and have both, cost and benefit. They put the cost on it, and whoever proposes it would explain the benefits as to why that should compete at the top of the list or someplace, if I understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm. There are things like the Art Commission's idea for storing the paintings over at the museum, and we know what the price on that last year, but it didn't really come to us for a decision.
Right.
And
we tabled
here,
it.
I think that the staff has one definition of contingency. Let me give you my definition of contingency. It is a line item in the budget that is an amount of money that is determined to be a reasonable hedge against the unforeseen. And if it doesn't get spent, which we would all hope that it doesn't get spent, it would fall to the fund balance, and it would start to build up Lake Casitas. We would end up without having to say, here, this much money goes into the reserve. We just try to manage each year to have a little bit left over that we can stick in there until we get to whatever level we all agree is the necessary,
Staff views the contingency fund as functioning in that way, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, but then we would not be talking about it at this stage with a whole list of things that maybe take up 50–60% of the contingency fund. It would be in the budget and say that after we budget that line item, now we have this much money to talk. Because what we're doing is we're giving the impression to us and to the community that, hey, here's some money on the table. Why don't you all get your requests in? And then we sort of try to figure out how we're going to spend it. But then the contingency is gone if you use that kind of an approach.
Right. No, I understand that, right.
Yeah, Bill.
I just want to extend what you're all saying, because all of this exposes the hole in this reporting. If you're going to have a final budget and projected actual, there should also be a beginning fund balance detailed
Agreed.
and actual projected ending fund balance.
Right.
If you do, it's like doing a income statement for a corporation without a balance sheet. That's what's going on here in terms of the reporting to council. We don't have the balance sheet, and that should be part and parcel of any reporting. All right? In other words, what are our disaggregated fund balances? Like, you show a lot of money, like you just mentioned in here, going
Right.
into the general fund,
Right.
Update fund, but no report about where the fund started and where it ended except your verbal. That should be a written report.
Okay.
What the
Run that
fund
back.
balances are in specific, and that should be reconcilable to the budget and actual. And this has not been happening for the last, since I took office, actually, in any of the budget cycles where we have proper disaggregated fund balance accounting. When we're talking about a contingency fund amount, that should be showing, okay, if this budget's adopted as we are looking at it, this is what that reserve balance goes to. You know, in other words, whenever you're budgeting things that affect the fund balances without showing the fund balances and the projected effect from the budget, you're not doing a full reporting to council.
Agreed.
And so I think that really is something that needs to be circulated to council as soon as possible for clarity with respect to.
Right. I agree that to follow up on what Bill is saying, when you look at the annual audit,
Yeah.
almost the first paragraph points to that fund balance of the
Right.
general fund as an indicator of the financial health of the community. And so when we go through this as sort of a practice session projecting next year, what are we projecting as the fiscal health of the community
Right.
next year? And it does need to have that beginning, the middle, and then what's
Right.
at the bottom line. So,
Right.
Okay.
And like when, and can you indulge me one more time? Okay.
We got all night.
And so when we, but again, to get back to that general fund fee, you know, what that would show is it would answer the questions, okay? If we feel like that is going into the overall umbrella of the undesignated contingency, then that's not really undesignated contingency.
Correct.
Okay, but that would all be answered by the proper reporting of the full disaggregated fund balances. So a lot of this discussion, you know, are legitimate questions just because we don't have that reporting.
Makes sense. Understood.
Mayor, I have one more thought on it, too. I could understand the gray when it comes to unfunded expenditures such as the Green Coalition and things of that nature. When I say unfunded, those are things that you've pulled out, we've all pulled out of our hats for who knows how long. So what I'm hearing tonight is we want to fund those as a carryover from we funded them last year. Am I correct? That's what I'm hearing.
Well, not exactly, but it's, yeah,
and-
there's an implication of that.
Right. And then that way we have, again, on the front end, we have a picture of the monies that we spent last year. The other part to me is when we say contingencies, anything left over we're basing on a projection of income coming in. It's a projection. There's no reality on a projection. It's just, we hope to hell we reach that point.
Hopefully it's a little better than that, but yeah, you're right. It's a guess.
But I'm saying, so anything that's left over, again, I could see that coming back. to the Budget Committee and allowing them to actually dissect it and say, does it need to go to peers? Does it need to go here? Does it need to go here? And let them make those recommendations for us. And if groups come forward and requesting an upgrade or additional funding in their, for their needs, then again, that's something that the Budget Committee could actually make a recommendation on, and then it goes back to council and we vote up and down on it.
Just one more comment. And again, it just gets to the semantics of contingency. To me, a contingency fund isn't one that we have at the beginning that we're now going to allocate monies out of. It's the very end is a contingency fund that's left over after we've allocated everything. And that is the contingency fund that if it's used for special reasons,
Right.
fine. If it's not used, then that's what gets allocated back into the reserve perhaps. So it just seems like a contingency's the end product, not what we're going to look at in the
Right.
beginning.
Well, and
it's semantics, I understand.
Well, but to the mayor's point, and I think it's a good point, what we tried to do is identify, what we needed, what we have to do, and then kind of everything that was in the you don't have to do pile, which is how we came up with that $259,000 amount. But you're right, if you pull out the money for the community groups, which is just an assumption, and then you start looking at all those other requests, you basically have more requests probably than you have even than what I even identified for a contingency. So then it's almost like you're competing with those things with the contingency. And what I'm hearing is that's not really the contingency should be the contingency. And it shouldn't have other things earmarked out of it. You need to have something there that is really there as the rainy day fund, like you said, and hopefully you're not having to spend
Why
that
we
at the
need
end of the year.
detailed fund balance accounting
Right.
before, middle, end.
Right.
Well,
bring
that would
back.
also be reflected in our actual versus our projected. Because again, when I was doing the math, the simple math here, I came up with a carryover of about $273,000 from last year's.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, but that's what I'm thinking. So then the question would be, that to me would be the starting balance. Because we have not earmarked it to go into any other funding. Yeah, we haven't decided where it should go unless we do that as a.
We don't know.
That, whatever.
That we don't know. If some of that, for example, is that general fund fee money, that doesn't go into undesignated.
Yeah, and whatever it ends up being after the closing of the books, that money really should be in the reserve. It should not be considered as available financing for the following year. There are jurisdictions that do take the unexpended appropriations, well, I shouldn't say appropriations, but the unexpended revenues at the end of a year, and they say available funding for the next year, because they have figured out that there's sort of 5% every year keeps showing up there, and that's kind of one way to squeeze out the, well, to make it more precise, but it's dangerous because one day that's not there, and yet you've already have labor contracts, you have lots of things that are out there that you have to do depending on that money that went away. So,
Oh, just for my clarification in the public, who exactly is the budget committee? I should know that, but I don't.
well, it's the finance director, the city manager, I serve on it, the treasurer, and we have one other, we have a citizen, which is former Mayor Olson.
Oh, yes, that's right, yeah.
And we did have a really good meeting not too long ago, and then I guess because the calendar started getting cramped, it looked like we were sort of falling a little bit behind. They came here, and I thought it was going to come back to us so we could have this conversation someplace else other than during the presentation, so.
I just had one last question, Mayor. When the 50% contingency fund or rainy day reserve fund.
Reserve, yeah.
When that was set up, was that a mandate that we had to achieve 50% or that we would strive to meet 50%? Because what I'm hearing tonight is we're striving to that.
Correct.
So then the other part of that is there anything when that was set up that said, and any monies left over from a fiscal year would automatically be put into that reserve, or are we assuming that that's where it would go? Because that would be something that we would need to dictate to the city manager and to the
Okay,
finance.
there are two parts to that. One, if the money is not appropriated, that's where it ends up.
Correct.
Okay, so as we go from one cycle to the next, from 1 year to the next, then you get to make the decision as to what do you want to do with that.
Right.
The resolution adopted by the city council said, and this is where it gets a little fuzzy, and Rudy asked for some, and the city manager asked for a little help on this, is they said 50%, but, you know, is it 50% of all the assets, or the receivables as well as the money in the bank? Is it cash? Is it not cash? Is it part of those capital funds, those other funds that were set up? It seems to me that we kind of mushed it together over the years in order to stretch it to look like we were hitting the goal. Maybe we should look at the goal again and say maybe that was a little bit high as to how much we need for safety, and then actually hit the goal.
And define the reporting element.
Right,
We're
yeah.
not getting,
Correct.
we don't have a
Because
clear
that-
reporting element.
According to the resolution, to answer the second part of your question, is that resolution that was adopted as the policy of the city is that every time that, until that reaches the target, money will be set aside. You won't just keep spending whatever's
Right.
left over. You put it in there, and hopefully you get to your target. If you have to reach in because of the Thomas Fire or some other, a recession, then it says that you shall repay it either that year or as quickly as you can. Now, we can change those goals and that policy, but that's what the policy says. And so there's a lot of things that are mixed together here, and that we're in transition. We're trying to, at least I'm in transition, trying to get a handle on this, because I cannot say with confidence that I know this personally and sign off on it like we're all expected to do if we don't kind of get it down, as Bill says, the beginning, and then what transpired, and what is the balance sheet, so that we know we're fortunate. I mean, I think that everybody should relax and think that, well, my God, we're better off than most communities. But some of it may be dumb luck. We had some bad luck with the fire, but we had some good luck that offset it. You can't really, that's not a great way to to manage or steer the ship, I don't think, but I'm happy to have the good luck. So anyway, okay, Steve.
Thank you for that
having been
feedback.
flogged a bit there, I apologize.
No, that's all right. It's good feedback. Couple things that I also want to point out for council that is in the proposed budget. We have money set aside to do a ADA implementation plan. That's been something that we've been trying to get that for a number of years so that we can make sure that we have a plan in place. It really is to protect the city from liability and lawsuits, to make sure that we have something in place as our first line of defense. Of course, then the idea is to actually, follow the plan and make the improvements. We also have in the money in the budget for this year, funds to continue sales tax audits, as well as TOT audits. We also have maintained, hopefully a high enough level for the tree maintenance, and we're continuing money for short-term rental enforcement as well. So, see, we're kind of getting towards the end here. Again, a couple things that we did not bring to you tonight that we will bring forward in future workshop would be the capital improvement plan. And as I said, I know we still haven't heard from a couple of community groups out there, so that we'll make sure that we get their request and have that to you at the March 22nd workshop. We'll come back with a clear information in terms of the starting and ending fund balances so that the council has that clearly in front of them. And Rudy, I'm not sure, will you be able to come back in a couple of weeks with some further detail? Well, we should take that to the budget committee in terms of the detail on what's making up the reserve, and then bring that forward to council as well.
Yeah, that information is generally provided in the final budget
Right,
document and the proposed document, so we should be able to put that information together and have it for, hopefully we'll have a meeting of the budget committee, we'll be able to get it scheduled for next week.
Okay.
Part of
If we
budget
could,
development, in other words.
Yeah.
if we can come back with the unaggregated.
Yeah, that one too.
Yeah, you can see where my mind is at
Both
this
are
point,
true.
so hopefully they won't be too aggravated, so. All right.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, and you'll let us know how soon we can get a
Yes.
budget committee
We'll work on
together?
that, getting that scheduled, yep.
Okay,
Any other questions?
do you have any other questions?
Well, the question that came up, are we gonna deal with that now? Did you want us to?
Oh, and in turn, we have a couple of minutes here, so yeah, so I know that Councilmember Francina had requested to not hold the budget workshop on June 12th at 6 p.m.
Unless I'm the only one, I mean, I guess
No,
you could
I-
proceed without me, but we.
No, I agree with you, but we could
Yeah.
take that up at our next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, at the end of
Very
the
good.
regular council meeting.
Okay, and then, the question I had about why we were the only ones not in the,
Yeah, we'll look, have the staff report back to us, tell us what we're missing out on, and why we missed out on
The
it.
history of,
Yeah, right.
okay. All right.
Okay,
and Bill.
okay, thank
Oh,
you.
Okay, we had,
We can go right into-
Mr. Miley, you like to?
For the record, my name is Bill Miley. I like the community relations management software idea. That sounds really good. Obviously, I'm supportive of the Affordable Housing Demonstration Project contract money. I too would like to know more about the trust fund for the county housing. I would like something new added. I would like the city produces an annual report to the public once a year annually, and in 3 forms: a newspaper page, a brochure, and then the original document. And consider getting involved with, asking the Nordhoff Journalism Department to get involved. And also, I would like the council to consider raising the TOT tax 1%. I don't know this for sure, but we're probably the lowest in the county. Thank you.
Okay. We'll call this, is there anything else before I adjourn this session? Okay, we got about 2 minutes before we go into the next, but okay.
Let's take a
Meeting's
2-minute
adjourned,
break.
thanks, yeah.